Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I am Ocean Robbins, and I am so glad you are here to talk about one of my favorite topics in the entire world, which is how we can grow healthy food and how you can grow healthy food no matter where you live. More people than ever before have been taking an interest in growing their own food recently, and COVID-19 has precipitated more and more people saying, wow, we don't want to be dependent on massive global supply chains. And we don't want to some people don't even want to have to go to the store all the time. They want to be able to own their own self-responsibility for food and food systems. And one of the things that's done is inspire more people to plant gardens and grow food in containers, in backyards, indoors even, and also in community gardens. And more people are saying, hey, planting seeds is part of how we help to plant security and stability and vitality for the future. But not everyone has a big garden to work with, or a green thumb for that matter. And we're here today to talk with Greg Peterson to find out how you can grow food, no matter where you live, no matter how much space you have. We're going to give tips and tricks for starting an urban farm, information on container gardening, talk a little bit about hydroponics, the basics of growing food at home, and some strategies for how to live green and reduce your reliance on the industrialized food system. This is a great way to alleviate food supply anxiety. It is a great way to boost your health, and it can even save you money. And we're here with the right person. Greg Peterson has been asking, what if there was a garden and a fruit tree in every yard? And for the last 30 years, he has been working to make that a reality. He has created one of Phoenix, Arizona's first environmental showcase homes for urban farming. He has a 1/3 acre yard that features primarily an edible landscape with over 50 fruit trees, rainwater and greywater harvesting, solar applications, and extensive use of reclaimed and recycled building materials. Greg's also the host of the Urban Farm podcast that in just 5.5 years has released over 600 episodes, amassing more than 2.5 million listens. On his days off, he hangs out in his garden with Heidi, his sweetheart, and Kismet, their pooch, creating new projects and catching some rays. Greg, it is great to be here with you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I'm over here blushing and shaking my head saying, yes, let's do that.
So first, Greg, let's jump in at the high level. What does growing food do for your soul?
Oh my gosh. So I am stuck in front of a computer most every day because, what we do is interacting with people out in the world and getting them engaged. And so one of the big things that gardening does for me is it gets me up out of my chair and out in the yard and moving around. I have recently turned 60 years old and I'm starting to feel it. And my sweetheart Heidi is a yoga teacher. She's been teaching yoga for over 25 years, and she's really helping me get situated back in my body and get it moving. So getting me out in the garden is one way to get my body moving. And one of the big things you can do when you're gardening is you squat down. Before modern times, people on the planet used to squat a lot because that's how they sat. And that's one of the big things that we're missing is that motion of just getting down on your feet and with your butt close to the ground and squatting. It makes such a difference. So that's a big piece of it, is it gets me exercising. But what it really does for my soul is it gives me an opportunity to take a seed and plant it in the ground. And 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, actually, I'm getting chills as I share this, actually pick something that's ripe and fresh and most nutrient dense right there in your yard. You know exactly what went into growing that. So you know how healthy it is for you.
Yeah, beautiful. When you were talking about the movement and the computer piece, I was remembering something that Mahatma Gandhi talked about once, which was that we all need a balance of work with our hands and work with our heads. Mm-hmm. And any imbalance in that can be really bad for the soul and the well-being of a human. And so people who are laborers, who only labor all day, can feel very frustrated because their bodies wear out and their minds are not getting stimulated. But people who
Right.
spend all day at the computer can get very lost because they need to embody, they need to do stuff with their hands. And so we all need that balance. And it's one of the things that I think gardening does. It is so literally and figuratively grounding
Oh
and
yeah.
embodying. It's so physical and tactile. And in the modern industrialized world, many of us are out of balance in one particular way, which is sitting at our desks, sitting in our chairs, cooped up indoors all day. And we need to reconnect with our own wildness and our own nature. And gardening is one way to do that, isn't it?
Oh, big time. Big time.
Yeah.
And it is so self-satisfying.
So a lot of people, I'm sure we have a whole range of listeners right now, some of whom have active gardens, many of whom have planted a thing or two. Some people haven't at all. But let's talk about the beginners here, the folks who haven't started. What are the first questions you should ask yourself if you want to grow a garden to help you assess what the potential is in your location?
Yeah. So the first thing I tell people is don't take on too much. You know, I get these people that show up and they're really excited and they have this huge backyard and they want to plant a garden in it, first time garden in this huge backyard, and it fails.
Yeah.
And when that happens, they get disappointed. And then it stops. So stepping into it, you want to really assess how much time and energy you have to put into this. And I suggest people pick one or two things to start with, get successful at that, and then grow from there. And I say this all the time, the most expensive thing to buy and the easiest thing to grow are herbs. You can grow herbs in a pot in a sunny windowsill. And when you go to a grocery store, you get a little 4-ounce, 2-ounce packet of basil for $4.
Yeah.
And the stuff grows like a weed in my yard. So that's the first place to look, is how much time and energy do you have? What do you want to grow? And how much space do you want to grow into? And one of the things that we do here at the Urban Farm, the front porch of the Urban Farm has a bunch of pots on it. And Heidi loves planting flowers every year. Well, this year with the pandemic, she says, Greg, I'm just going to put groceries in the pots. And so she mostly grew groceries, lettuces, spinaches, kale, that kind of stuff in pots on our front porch. And then, from there, what you need to do is you need to assess where your garden is going to go. And there are four, I call it 4 solar aspects. And the solar aspect is essentially where the sun comes from in your yard.
Yeah.
And my front porch faces east. So an east facing exposure gets sun from sun up until noon. In the desert, that's the best place to grow a garden, because afternoon it's getting in the shade.
Mm-hmm.
And with all the extreme heat that we've had, especially in the past couple of years, that's an eastern exposure is an excellent place in a real hot climate to grow. Next place to look is a southern exposure. A southern exposure in the northern hemisphere gets sun all day. So there's things that we can do in a southern exposure to put up shade if we need to, or just plant and grow. If you're in California, it's not so hot in most of the parts of California. So growing in a southern exposure is also a great place to grow. Here in the low desert, a western exposure gets sun from noon until sundown. That's hard in the desert. Where you're at, it might be a really good place to grow if you need that extra sun and extra warmth to get your garden growing. And in the northern hemisphere, a northern exposure doesn't get very much sun at all. So I share that with you so that your friends can go out and spend a little bit of time observing in their space to see how much sun your garden's actually going to get. Because if you want to grow vegetables, you need a good 6 to 8 hours of sun in order to make them thrive.
Every day, average.
Every day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And in case anybody is not clear, when we say southern exposure, we're talking about facing the south and
exactly.
having, let's say, freedom from trees to the south.
Right.
So you get to know what the sun's arc is in your location.
Exactly.
At different seasons. Where does it rise and where does it set at each season? And your growing season, of course, will vary depending on where you are, but also based on that. And even within one town, you can have massive variability based on how much sunshine there is in different spots. And also another factor you didn't talk about so much was climate, but certainly even within one spot of land, there can be huge variance where cold tends to drop into the valleys. So you get much colder nights at the bottom of a valley. And if you go up a hill, even a couple hundred yards, you could have a 10-degree rise in temperature.
Exactly.
In some places.
Yeah, exactly. And in permaculture, I like to call permaculture the art and science of working with nature. And I've studied it for over 30 years. Observation is the first thing that you do. And so those solar aspects and what you referred to as the climates, we call them microclimates in our yards. Because you're right, it can be in my yard, there can be 5 or 10 degrees difference on any given moment, for that matter. And so you need to go out and explore the spaces in your yard so that you can discover where's the best place to grow food is.
Yeah, great. What about soil and bugs and deer and critters and like how much do people need to worry about creating a boundary? Gophers and are those more of an issue in rural places than urban places?
Not necessarily. I live right smack in the middle of Phoenix, Arizona, and in my yard in the past 5 years, we have had bobcats, javelina, owls, hawks, rats, of course. I said bobcats already. So we've had lots of wildlife here that will love your groceries. And that goes back to the observation piece. You have to pay attention. And a great place to observe is with your neighbors. If you got a neighbor that's growing, you can ask them, hey, what kind of pests am I going to be dealing with here? And how do I address them? Most of the time with the 4-legged animals, including gophers and squirrels and that kind of stuff, you have to put up barriers to keep your garden safe. I did a garden consult about a decade ago with a lady out in the desert, and she had put up a 10-foot tall, 40 by 60-foot metal fenced area with a roof on it so that the critters wouldn't get in. That's how she had her garden. Now that's pretty extreme, but those are the kinds of things that you have to start looking at if you're going to plant a garden. And you mentioned growing hydroponically indoors. One of my favorite tools for that, and the other piece I'll want to talk about here in a minute is soil, but is the tower garden. Are you familiar with tower gardens?
I am, yep.
I have a third of an acre, and a third of an acre here is 80 feet by 160 feet deep. We grow lots of food in the ground here, but about 8 feet that way in my house is a tower garden that we grow on 12 months a year. It doesn't have soil in it. A tower garden is they call it aeroponics, but essentially it's hydroponic growing system that you put nutrients in. We keep it indoors to keep away the bugs and pests. So while it is a little bit of an investment to get into one, we eat off of that thing just about every day. So that's, that's another solution if you got critters and problems like, with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
just a word of enthusiasm for indoor gardening too. One of the biggest challenges with gardening is when you kind of forget about it or don't have the time to harvest because you get stressed out. You put all the work into planting and then harvest season comes and you're off traveling or you just get busy and don't think about it till like 11 o'clock at night and it's too dark and too late. But if you're growing indoors, it's much harder to forget. And it's right there. Like you can have truly the most local food in the universe. It's like, 5 feet, 10 feet away from your kitchen table potentially. So that can be nice. And also it adds beauty, doesn't it?
Oh yes, big time. Because the tower gardens, I love them. They look like this Christmas tree when they're all grown out, but it's all food. They're like 6 feet tall. And I love, love, love my tower garden.
So let's talk for a moment about, because that raises an interesting question, compost and nutrients and what you feed plants. And of course, with hydroponic, there's some controversy about what's organic. Are there sustainable nutrient solutions for hydroponic systems? And also tell us a little bit about composting. 2 different topics, really.
Perfect. So the nutrients, here's what I know about the nutrients in hydroponics. And it's the ones that I get from the Tower Garden folks. They make it is mineral based. So it's vegan, and it's just nutrients to make the plants grow. And past that, I really don't know about nutrients on hydroponics because I don't play a whole lot with hydroponics. It's just another way to grow. But I do know that the ones that we use in the Tower Garden are very clean. Uh, and as far as composting goes, let's start with soil. And the most important thing that you can be doing in growing a garden, once you've done your observation, is figure out what your soil looks like. And there are 5 components of healthy soil, and most people have one of them. It's called dirt. Dirt is broken down rocks that have ground together over time and made this fine powder, granular stuff that good luck trying to grow anything if you just have dirt. So it's your job as an urban farmer, as an urban grower, as a rural grower to build healthy soil. So 5 components of healthy soil: dirt, airspace, water, organic matter, and everything that's alive in the soil. Without all 5 of those, you're going to be hard pressed to grow anything. Now, the good news is that if you just have dirt that's highly compacted, the water can't get in. If you start adding compost and planting mix and organic matter on top, over the course of 6 to 18 months, you're going to have this amazing soil show up in your space. So the good news is add organic matter and add compost. And what we do for compost here at the urban farm is we actually do our own composting, surprise, surprise, and I call it a regenerative composting system. And what regenerative means is that it self-propels itself. Okay? It becomes a circular notion rather than just compost coming in, we raise food, and that's the end of the system, right?
Yeah.
So we actually collect food waste from a restaurant. We have our food waste from our house. We have 3 or 4 neighbors that bring us food waste. So we get people trained. I have 3 or 4 neighbors that bring me their leaves off of their trees in the fall.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff goes into our regenerative composting system. And thermophilic or hot composting is the hardest kind of composting to do. And so what I suggest that people do is if you don't have a lot of food scraps like we do, we have a lot of food scraps, so we can actually make a big compost bin.
Yeah.
The simplest thing to do is get a worm bin. There's all kinds of people out on the internet talking about worm composting. You can keep them inside. So get yourself a worm composting bin. They'll eat it all, and they make worm poop, which is worm castings, which is absolutely amazing for your garden beds, for your potted plants. So, I have a whole hour-long class that I do on regenerative composting, but what it boils down to is make healthy soil. And if all you have is kitchen scraps, get a worm bin.
Yay. That's great. And of course you can do both, and you can have fun with the wormies, and you can do more. We produce a lot of compost, and I think that's going to be the case for a lot of healthy eaters, because quite frankly, when you eat a lot of vegetables, that's where you tend to have, the stems and the roots and the various parts you cut off and so forth. And that's where your compost comes in. And, people shouldn't be composting animal products generally, right? I mean, I think eggshells are okay, but you don't want to compost meat, right? Because it kind of brings the bad stuff, and it doesn't do well, right? But I'll just put out a little passionate plea here. As a human being who wants a viable world for my kids and future generations, I think that compost is about the lowest hanging fruit for each of us to turn something bad into something good. What the modern industrialized world is doing with our compostable waste is a disaster. We are dumping it into landfills where it becomes toxic and polluting, but there are powerful, wonderful nutrients in there that can be so life-giving, and they can help us to regenerate our soil. So this is an incredible opportunity. If you don't already compost, and there isn't already a composting system in your city or community operated municipally, then it really behooves you to try to find a way to do it. There are lots and lots of systems, some more fancy and involved, some really low tech. You know, it's not the best thing, but like at one point in my life, we just had a crate kind of thing in the backyard, and we just dumped stuff in there. And when it got full, we moved to another one. And when it got full, the first one had been sitting for 6 months, and then we could just shovel it out and throw it on the ground. Even if you're not growing food, enrich the soil and let your nutrients not become a source of waste, but become a source of nourishment for future generations of life. And if you do grow food, you'll realize this stuff is magnificent. It's like the best fertilizer there is. It's so rich and potent and amazing. And it's how you regenerate life. The earthworms come back, life comes back, your soil gets more beautiful and teeming with life. And it's just awesome stuff. So compost, compost, compost.
One, you know, a super, super simple way to do, I call it pit composting. Go out with a shovel, take your kitchen scraps, dig a little hole, dump it in, cover it up. It can be that simple.
Right. And you can dig a long trench, and then you fill in one piece at a time. So every time you go out, you just dump in a spot and cover, dump in a spot and cover. You can use like a bucket, like a little inside bucket with a lid on it. You don't have to have a fancy composting thing. You can. Some of them have nice systems for like letting the air breathe and not letting smells out. You can spend, you know, lots of money on that, but you can also get just a simple reusable bucket and fill it up and empty it once a week or once a day or whatever, depending on how fast you produce it. We fill a big bucket every day, but that's our house.
Right. Oh yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. Totally. But it's fun stuff. So, so let's jump to some of the questions we have from Whole Life Club members. Judy said, I live in a condo with a small outdoor area that's in shade for most of the day. What are my options for edible landscaping? Also, the ground is impenetrable due to tree roots, so my plants are in containers.
Yeah, well, definitely containers. And go back to the solar aspect that we were talking about. If you're going to grow something, whether it's in the pot or in the ground, you need a good 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. And if that patio is on the north side of a building, you're not going to get that sun. So it makes it really hard to grow. If I had a northern facing patio, so a patio that didn't get any sun at all, I'd get myself a tower garden with lights on it and grow in there.
Yeah, thank you. Since tower garden keeps coming up, we'll go ahead and create a link. So go to foodrevolution.org/tower, and we'll get a link up to go learn more about that.
Perfect.
We heard from Janelle, who said, my house is on the edge of a small suburban wooden area, and my yard is visited by deer who often eat even the deer-resistant plants. Any solution besides erecting a 10-foot enclosure?
Nope. You got to put some kind of fence up to keep those out. Yeah.
Here's a cool thing, Greg, that we did recently, because we actually host permaculture classes on our land where
nice.
Family lives. And the permaculture teacher did this. So we put in a fairly large garden and orchard area, and we enclosed it with a fence. And they put rather than gopher wiring underneath everything, which is a kind of unbelievably massive project.
Oh yeah.
Or doing raised beds, which didn't feel like it was our optimal scenario. We chose to we did this thing where you go down with wire several feet, and then you create like a little hook that goes this way outside at the bottom. And it's a big project, trenching the entire perimeter of the fence and putting that down. But what it does is the gophers actually don't burrow that deep. And if they come up against the hooky part, they just take off and go somewhere else. So then you're only left with the gophers that are already in there and their offspring. But if you can get them out, then you're gopher proof, and you don't have to deal with gophers ever again in that space. Have you worked with this type of system before?
I have, and what I actually use rather than metal, and I've seen metal used before, I do concrete. I call them weed and pest walls, where I go down 16, 18 inches and put in a concrete footer, And then and it usually comes about 4 inches above the ground, and I cap it with a nice red brick so it looks pretty. And that does two things for us. That actually keeps the weeds out. So we have in our landscape, we have nut grass and Bermuda grass, which is very invasive. So that's the reason I originally put these in, was to keep the weeds out. But that also then keeps out the burrowing squirrels and moles and voles and gophers and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, nice. And then we're putting in some barn owl habitat. We're gonna, and they'll just hang out. We have a nice meadow, and they'll hang out. But then we're gonna make sure that they spend some time. I'm not a the chain of life is what circles of life are, what they are. So I mean, I wish the gophers well. At the same time, if the barn owls are going to eat a gopher, I'd rather they eat one that's in my garden.
Right. Exactly.
So, that's kind of how it works. There is an interesting piece, and I'm curious how you reconcile with this. For human beings who want to be compassionate and bring more love and beauty and peace into the world, and are concerned about the well-being of animals, when you actually think about it, there's a bit of violence sort of inherent in gardening. If you're keeping deer out, sometimes those deer are going to be hungry. If you're, if you're dealing with gophers, well, sometimes you're going to kill them essentially, or get a barn owl to do the job for you, or whatever. And ultimately, we want to just have them not be there so we don't have to deal with that. Because I don't know anybody who likes to kill gophers. But so we try to keep them out. But then, you're creating a boundary, and you're basically saying, hey, all of you wonderful wildlife out there, you can starve. We're feeding our family. And I'm just curious, like, how you, or even aphids, like we maybe bring in ladybugs to kill the aphids and eat them, right? Or we may spray with some kind of insecticidal soap if necessary, if there's a big infestation. How do you reconcile that as a human being of conscience who wants to bring more love and compassion and peace into the world?
Yeah. So one of the things that I know about nature is that it's infinitely abundant. And I've said this for years, that the only place that lack lives on the planet is right here between our ears. Because when I look at my garden and the massive amount of abundance that I grow in my garden, it sometimes is mind-blowing to me. So one of the things that I suggest people do is plant enough for both. So if you have a garden and you have a outside of your garden, so you get inside garden, outside garden, plant. And I was just talking to a guy about this on a garden consult 2 days ago. I said, plant the periphery with stuff that the deer and the javelina are going to like, so that you're actually giving something there. Plus, it enhances the environment around the space. So plant enough for them and for you. And the other thing that I know for sure, that I've seen this over and over again, is that when we garden with nature, garden organically, don't use chemicals of any kind, don't use chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides. When we get our systems in balance, that's exactly what happens, is they're in balance. And then the only time the aphids show up in my yard is at the end of a life cycle of a plant. I get this question every March, April, May. I got broccoli growing and it's growing great, and the aphids attacked it. And what I tell people to do is, you should have harvested it. It's past its prime, because those bugs are there for a reason. They're there to break down plant matter that is going to the end of its life. So really, my answer to that question is work with the balance of nature. Just as well as I do, that what permaculture is the study of how nature works. And then we overlay that on our systems. So the more I watch the systems, the more in balance I can make them, the less of a problem I have with that.
Yeah, thank you. And just a word about the stress and the cost or time and materials it takes to build fencing or other infrastructure to create that container. If you think in the long term about your garden, if it was a 3-month operation, it wouldn't make sense, or even a 1-year operation. But if you're planning not to live somewhere for long, you may not want to invest a lot of infrastructure. But But if you think long term, and it's a way of really putting roots into a place. If you live somewhere that you want to deepen and make it more beautiful for your being there, and you want to grow over time, then gardening is a beautiful way to think in terms of the years and decades even to come. And of course, fruit trees are perhaps the most dramatic example of that, because
Yeah.
in many cases you don't get much for several years, sometimes even
Right.
5 years or more.
Mhm.
But a generation from now, people will be harvesting the fruits of your labor, literally.
Yes.
Speaking of which, Jamie said, we bought a farm in Alberta, Canada 7 years ago. I immediately started to plant apple, cherry, and plum trees, envisioning a small orchard. Every year I had to replace trees, and all but one original tree have died. It could be the soil, or perhaps they are a little too exposed to the winds, but I still have great hopes for the space. I just need some help to make it a reality.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on Jamie's situation?
Yes. So number one, interact with the, I don't know if there's a cooperative extension in Canada, but find out who's growing orchards in your area. Find out what the problem is. I grow in the low desert. It gets to 120 degrees throughout the summer here. That's a very different growing situation than growing in Alberta. And so, number one, find out who's growing and how they're growing. Number two, make sure that you have the correct varieties of trees for your area. Most fruit trees are grafted, which means they take a rootstock that works really well in an area and they graft the fruiting stock on top of it. If you plant trees that are on the wrong rootstock for your area, they'll die. The other thing, I think there was a question in there that somebody had planted trees and they weren't getting fruit off of them after many years. That could be something we call chill hours. You need to have the appropriate amount of cold for the appropriate tree for your area. So there's a lot of tree things that you need to discover about your area. And the first thing I would be doing is finding other people growing in my area and take lessons from them.
You know, one of the fascinating things about what you're just saying here is that every ecosystem has something that's perfect for that ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and life is just abundant in its adaptability.
Oh yeah.
So in the tropics, you know, you might be looking at mangoes and papayas, but you're going to have a tough time with peaches, you
Right.
know. And then if you get up north and into, or way south, if you get into really cold environments where there's intense winters, well, that's actually what some trees need to thrive. But of course, other trees will be killed by it. So coming back to learning what works in your area is critically important, of course. And rootstock is also a big deal. So there are different kinds of rootstocks. And so presumably, hopefully, if there are nurseries in your area, they understand this and they pull in the right combinations that actually work, and they're not going to sell stuff that won't make it in your location.
Well, I've said, so I run a fruit tree education program here in Phoenix. I have been growing fruit trees in the low desert for 45 years. I've been teaching people how to grow them for about 25. And here's what I know. You can go into every single big box store in the low desert here and most nurseries, and they will sell you a fruit tree that will never make fruit. So you have to decipher what is going to work in your area by doing your research. That's just the bottom line. And then make sure that you get the right ones.
Right. And of course, even as we mentioned, within an area, there's different microclimates. And
exactly.
So that's good to know. We heard from Jessica, who said, at the moment, I have about 20 apple trees that are only a few centimeters high. Last year, I had a bag of apples whose seeds all had started to sprout, and I didn't have the heart to toss them. It turns out cutting an apple without accidentally going through those green babies is quite tricky. Greg, is Jessica in for a rude surprise, given that these are not grafted with rootstock?
She's in for an exciting surprise. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So what she's got there is a hybrid apple. So likely what happened is those apples were pollinated from, another tree. And so you got pollen A and, the boy pollen and the girl egg, and they come together and make an apple seed that may or may not make apples. And you know the story of Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed was a
Yeah.
real person.
Yeah.
And what he would do is he would go to the cider mills, collect the seeds, and go ahead of the civilization and plant out trees so that he would have apple trees to sell to people. So one of the amazing things that we have in this country is a massive variety of apples. We have over 4,000 varieties of apples because of, apple A and apple B cross-pollinated, make a seed. And this guy was out there hundreds of years ago planting the seeds all along the way and coming up with whatever they came up with.
Yeah.
And there's a collection in Geneva, New York of, I don't know, 3,000 different varieties of apples, which is kind of mind-blowing, right? So what you have there is a bit of a hybrid. Hybrids aren't bad. Given what you're doing, I'd grow them out and see what you get, knowing that it's an experiment, and you may get apples or you may get little hard things that you can't eat, or you may get nothing at all.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
What about avocados? I don't know who else has done this, but as a science project in elementary school, I sprouted an avocado seed with toothpicks, four toothpicks, and then drop it in water halfway, and it sprouted. It grew roots and stems. But I don't suspect it would have grown fruit. Do you know what would happen if you kept going with that?
Again, it's the same thing. You get avocado A and avocado B, and they make, they cross-pollinate and give you avocado C. So there is a lady about 3 miles that way from me who did that with a bunch of avocados in the 70s, and she has amazing avocado trees that make avocados. So, not that all of them are going to work, but you know what? This is the fun part of gardening. This is the part where we get to make magic and experiment and see what happens. So go ahead and play with it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Luann said, I started a garden this past year. I'm a first timer. I grew beets, but I couldn't tell when to pull them up. Also Brussels sprouts. They got attacked by little white worms and ate every leaf. I managed to get a small harvest that tasted amazing. She said, how long are the ones in the stores from harvest? Not as much flavor. I'm not quite sure what that question refers to, but any thoughts about when to pull beets up and what to do if Brussels sprouts are getting attacked by little white worms?
So the little white worms are some kind of caterpillar. And generally speaking, caterpillars show up when the plant is going out of season. So the thing there is make sure that you're planting the Brussels sprouts at the appropriate season for your climate. If I was going to plant Brussels sprouts here in Phoenix, Arizona, I plant them in late August, early September, because with a 90-degree growing season, they're going into a cold time, and I'll be harvesting them in November. And that's not a great time for the bugs. But if I planted them in November, December, they'd grow up and they'd be harvestable in February, right about this time. And that's when the bugs are thriving. So that's a timing issue. As far as harvesting the beets, you just got to plant enough of them and then go pull one. Same with carrots, radishes. Just go out and pull one or two and see what you get.
Right.
You're going to come up. Go ahead.
I was just saying, because you don't know how big they are under there until you see, because they will really grow at different paces. And that's probably true with every plant, that the pace of growth will vary dramatically. And some, their maximum size is going to be a couple inches, and some might get 6 inches diameter even, or more. So you can experiment. Right. And that's why you plant lots and then see what happens, right? Yeah, I mean, but there are some basic guidelines, like you need at least a couple of months with beets minimum. Although I guess it depends how much sun they're getting.
It depends how much sun they're getting, number one, and how long does the seed packet will generally tell you how long to harvest.
Yeah.
So radishes are the quickest things to grow. You can get radishes in 30 days. Beets are probably more like 90 to 120 days. So, you need to, if you have Chioggia beets, look at the packet or do a little bit of research online and say, it's a 90-day beet. So, all right, I'm going to plant a row of beets and know that in, 70 days, I'm going to start peeking down to see what's coming and maybe pull one up, see what's there.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people plant from seeds. Some people plant from previously seeds that have already been sprouted, starters. Yep. Right. Exactly. And some people grow their own starters and then transplant them, which if you live in a cold climate where the growing season is short, can be a great thing. You can make a little box of sorts or a mini greenhouse just to get starters going, and then you can plant them and you get a few extra weeks of growing season that way, right? And then put them in after the last frost.
Right. And it depends what you're growing.
Yeah.
For things after the last frost, for your watermelons and cucumbers and that kind of stuff. So I can't even remember where I was going with that, but I'm sure it'll come back to me.
I was going to ask if root vegetables should always be planted from seed, though. They not do as well from starters.
Correct. And I don't know anybody that actually grows root vegetables for plant starts. You always want to plant them from seed.
Yeah. Okay.
And be careful. I had a volunteer here a couple of years ago that came in, and I gave him 4 ounces of carrot seeds. He said, "Oh, I know how to plant them." And he, 4 ounces of carrot seeds is 20,000 carrots. He planted them all. He planted them all. I had a carrot forest in my front yard. So when you're planting, you want to put like 2 or 3 carrot seeds in a hole. So be careful with that. Same with beet seeds. Just, be conscious of that.
Yeah. We heard from Cheryl who said, I recently moved into a townhouse complex where I have a small garden bed currently planted with flowers. I mentioned to my neighbor that I'd like to plant some veggies, and she warned me that wild rabbits will beat me to my harvest. Mm-hmm. What do you recommend to protect my garden from rabbits? Will a cage over my garden keep them out, or will they burrow under to get at the food?
Most likely the cage or a fence will keep them out. That, and again, it depends, because here our rabbits don't burrow, but the squirrels do. And so a friend of mine had a real nice garden in her backyard, and the squirrels, dug in and came in that way. So you have to do your observation, and observation always includes chatting with other gardeners in your area.
Yeah. How deep does do you need to go down if you're trying to, because you can put a fence down as well as up. Mm-hmm. How deep does it have to go generally to keep squirrels and rabbits from burrowing under it?
16 to 18 inches.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Maureen said, I'm not a farmer by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm beginning to get a little interested at 74.
Hey. Yes.
But I live in a subdivision with restrictions on what I can put in the yard. We currently do use the yard for tomatoes. However, the rabbits, squirrels, and groundhogs help themselves. If I were to use an area of the basement, I'd like to know how much space I would need and what are the best things to grow there given the limited space and no sun.
Did she say basement?
Basement, she said.
Basement. Yes. Okay.
So, cool. And no sun. So I'm guessing that's basically indoors is what I'm.
Yeah, indoor. That would be, likely hydroponic gardening. And my tower, here it is again, my tower garden is 18 inches in diameter and 6 feet tall. So that doesn't take up much space. It really depends on what kind of system you want to put in and what lighting you want to add, because in a basement, you're going to need lighting. So, yeah.
Yeah. I want to say a word about sprouting. For people who want to grow something the easiest possible way in the entire universe with absolutely minimal wait time, yep. You can grow sprouts. Hours. Do you sprout at all, Greg? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
I have in the past. There's actually, I had a guy on my podcast 3 or 4 years ago that wrote a book on salads on your countertop or something like that. And that's what he was doing. He was sprouting seeds, and you want to buy organic seeds, and you get a mason jar, and they sell little lids for them that breathe. So they're like a metal screen on the top. And basically what you do is you put a cup or half a cup or a tablespoon, however many is suggested for the size of jar that you have, and you rinse them. Just, rinse them with chlorine-free water. You always want to use chlorine-free water.
Yeah.
And let them sit on the counter, and you rinse them once a day. And usually within 36 to 72 hours, you have these amazing sprouts, and you can do broccoli and beans and onions, and there's just no end to the things that you can sprout. And that is actually the super simplest way to garden.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hydroponics, isn't it? Technically. No
Technically,
soil. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So yeah, hopefully we've inspired some people to make their thumbs a little greener here today.
Right.
Greg, any other words of inspiration or motivation you'd care to share with our audience about why growing food matters?
Yeah. So a couple things. You said green thumbs. I can't tell you how many people tell me, "Oh my God, I have brown thumbs. I kill
Yeah.
everything." The
Yeah.
only reason you kill things is because you don't know the rules. There's very specific rules, especially climate by climate, on how to grow food. People come here from Minnesota and they try and grow food here and they fail because they don't know the rules. So get together, there's Facebook groups, there's gardening clubs, there's community gardens. Get together and find out who's doing what in your neighborhood around growing food. So that's really the big piece. And yeah, I think that's what I'll leave it with.
Okay, wonderful. One more thing I've actually got to ask you about is, can you inspire us a little bit about gray water systems and rainwater catchment?
Yes. There is a source of water that comes into your house that will supply, in most areas, most or all of your water for your landscape. And it's rainwater. So that's the water that falls on your property from the sky. And there's gray water. And gray water is any water that goes down any sink in your house except your kitchen sink and your toilet. And in Arizona, gray water is legal to use in your yard. And one of the things that I've done here at the urban farm is I moved some of the facilities outside. So I have an outdoor shower and an outdoor sink where we wash vegetables and that kind of stuff. So, and that water actually goes out into the landscape.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of water harvesting in every way. And the key piece to make it really easy is that you don't want to store it. You don't ever want to store gray water because it comes black water very quickly. And storing rainwater is very expensive. So what I suggest that people do, what I coach people to do, is design a water harvesting system for your yard. Get the water, your rainwater and your gray water in your yard where you want it. So you plant the water first, and then you plant the landscape around it. I'm sure you know the name Brad Lancaster, longtime friend of mine. I actually taught at his permaculture design course 30 years ago. And he is the guy on the planet to talk to you about rainwater and gray water. He's written a couple of books on rainwater harvesting for drylands and beyond. And there is an amazing amount of information out there now because of him and Art Ludwig and other people that are doing this work around rainwater and gray water harvesting. And it's so important, especially with where we are climatically on the planet.
Yeah.
We've got to be looking at those resources.
We do. I was looking recently with my twin sons at some various maps of the world, and we were looking at where there is the most rainwater on planet Earth and where there is the most population density on planet Earth. And interestingly enough, almost to a T, the places where the most people live are also the places that tend to get more water. China, India get a lot of water. Arizona, where you live, not a lot of water, not a lot of people. Yes, there's a lot of people in Phoenix, but On the whole,
Right.
Arizona is not well populated.
Exactly.
And so this is actually true all over the planet. Of course, there are exceptions like Los Angeles or Phoenix, but for the most part, humans have tended to populate in places where it rains.
Hmm.
And there's something about the fertility that rain brings that's critical to
Yes.
life. We live on the
Yes.
water planet for a reason. And so what you're talking about here, which is one of the principles of permaculture, is how you can actually nurture your ecosystem by nurturing whatever water comes to you, to use it wisely and spread it out. So we're actually doing things where we're creating, we mapped the contours of our land, and then we
Nice.
created these kind of ditches, if you will, with berms on the backside, so that the
Mhm.
water, as it flows down, will settle and drop into the earth and replenish the aquifers and go deep down, rather than just running off and being a nuisance that can threaten our house, you know.
Right.
And
Yep.
then we get less swampy stuff and more deep irrigation, and then that's good for the trees over time, because their roots will go down deep because there's water there and you don't need to water them as much. So these are
Exactly.
some wonderful principles. Hopefully they inspire folks to dig their roots a little deeper and get inspired a little more around what's possible to replenish our soil, replenish our water ecosystems, and grow fabulous, healthy food in the process. Greg, I just want to thank you so much, because
Oh my gosh.
you're showing it's possible anywhere. On a third of an acre, you're growing a feast every day, and
Yep.
you're inspiring so many people. So many seeds have been planted because of you. So many fruits have been harvested because of you, and
Thanks.
we're also inspired. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I am always game.
We've been talking with Greg Peterson, the urban gardener, founder of Urban Farm Podcast. And people can find you at urbanfarm.org, right?
Yep.
Okay, so
Urbanfarm.org.
urbanfarm.org, you can get lots of great resources, tips, tools to help you with your urban or suburban or rural farm, small or large, in your home or outside. But his specialty is really helping the small scale folks to do stuff in a really good way. So I hope we've inspired you a little bit today, and thanks so much for joining us. When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club. Click the link to find out more and to join in now.